to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This week, we have Ruben Morales, lead destruction artist at Sony Santa Monica. Man, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I mean, you're the, I bet your marketing or HR team must know me by name at this point where I've had so many of you guys on.
They're like, oh, you're talking about him? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, all right, cool. Nice. This should be easy then.
See, this is the only useful thing about, like, I mean, I'm very strict on the whole, like, I don't, and I say this to everyone who comes on, I'm like, I don't give a fuck about what you're working on at the moment. Like, and I mean that in the politest way possible. I don't want to talk about that. That's not why I want to talk to you. And luckily that's made sure, like, yeah, the HR and marketing people and communications people at studios are like, oh yeah, I've got a good track record so far. So it's been good to this kit paid off. So most of the time I try to avoid this whole trip down memory lane thing. But you're a destruction artist, and this is not probably a common job title people have, who are early on in the industry probably heard of very much. I think it'd be really useful for you to just sort of talk us through, like, how you wound up here as a destruction artist. Because I imagine you didn't enter the industry like, okay, I'm going to make shit blow up. Like, I imagine there is a bit of a trajectory there. It'd be really cool for you to go through that for us.
Yeah, it's a trip how I just kind of fell into it. Back when I was finishing up college, getting my bachelor's at AI, Santa Monica, rest in peace to that. Thankfully, I was one of the last groups that had a good time there. A lot of people that I know were all out there doing our thing, and it was a good time to have the AI name. But as I was finishing up, I got to work at Sony, and I got hired as a cinematic artist. Because at the time, I was more so just kind of being a generalist. For my demo, I kind of handled animation, very minor rigging, because I knew that involving animation, I kind of had to get an idea of just the basics. Modeling, texturing, some lighting, some particle and effects work, and very minimal destruction stuff I had done at the time for a project in school. So I just kind of had everything there, and I didn't really have a studio that I wanted to go to. At the time, everybody was like, oh, you got to cater your demo to where you want to go. And for a while, I wanted to work on Halo until I realized that they were in Seattle, Washington, and I didn't want to move. So I'm like, all right, well, there goes that. But I'll just find a spot. I'll just be a generalist. And I think having all that, they were looking for a cinematic artist at the time for God of War 3. We'd come in, get the camera, the characters, the environment, were all provided to us. And they're like, all right, if the camera looks past that environment and it's all empty, fill it all in, replace it, put everything, make it look like it continues. If this giant building is getting destroyed, you gotta blow it up. You gotta add some particles to it. Talk to the particle guys, do what you gotta do. So it was a trip because they gave us a lot of freedom for the most part to kind of just do whatever. I'm like, cool, all right. And I just happened to have a lot of scenes that had destruction, and I liked movies that had a lot of destruction. So I just like, all right, this looks visually appealing. I'll make this fly at camera. This is gonna break there. I have that. Travel my eye, like, all right, boom, 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 and here's the character. Oh, don't block the view of the character. Never have something wipe the camera, full black screen or obscure, like the money shot, basically. And they liked it. I liked the stuff. They liked it. Anytime we had a review, Stig would just come by and be like, cool, all right. And he just head off. I'm like, all right, cool, I did good. Ken Feldman as well. He would love this stuff. He'd just be like, man, I love this. This is great. Let me take a look. And he'd kind of drive around and give us pointers, and we took all that in. And it just kind of did it of whatever we had. And it was a very basic system. It was almost like a little slingshot in a way they had of like, all right, how do you do destruction for a simulation here? And they're like, you kind of just break the geo however you need to. And then we have this little arrow, and the more you pull the arrow back and let it go, it goes, and it just creates the sim for these objects. And you tag this as, physics or what you want to be dynamically triggered, make that animation, send that animation into the game, and it's done. I'm like, all right, this is cool. And it was a trip because you did all that, and it just like so simple, just like, and I blew up a building. Like, pull it farther back and you blow up the world or whatever. It's just all right, it's just a simple little triangle. And well, one of our effects guys mentioned it a couple weeks ago. He's like, dude, I miss that tool. Like, I do too, but we got all these powerful things. We got Houdini, we got Fracture, we got PDI, pull down it. But after Sony, I was like, all right, cool, I'm Mr. Sony. I can go wherever I want. I just did God of War 3. I did a bunch of scenes, and I couldn't really find a job for a little bit. And I'm like, okay, so this is how it is. Eventually, I ended up landing at a small studio doing some environment work, which that's a story in itself of like they needed to show off that they were working on a game to some marketing guys so that they can get funding for the game.
Okay.
So they're like, we're just hiring you just to sit at this computer and look like you're doing work. I'm like, okay. And I loaded up the computer. These business suits are just walking around. They're like, come take a look at what we're doing. And they have 3D Max open on the computers. I'm like, all right, cool. I love 3D Max. 3D Max has always been my thing since high school. I was lucky enough in my high school to have 3D Max, Flash, Photoshop, which I found out not a lot of places offered that. When I went to college, I'd already had 4 years of that stuff in mind. Really, in college terms, it was like maybe 2 weeks worth of knowledge.
Yeah.
Because at the time there weren't a lot of tutorials, but it was pretty cool. So I just started modeling. I'm like, all right, well, here's a banana clip gun. I'm just gonna model that. And the guy's walking around. He's like, yeah. So let's see. And here's, wow, that looks really cool. Yeah. So and he kept going, and he's like, why'd you do that? Like, I wanted me to look busy, so I just made it. He's like, cool. You want a job? I'm like, yeah. He's like, we can't pay you. Like, okay. He's like, but when we get funding, as you saw, we'll pay you. All right. And eventually it never came to fruition. They would pay us in Jamba Juice for lunch. And I'm like, I got bills. I got gas to pay. Sorry, man. A buddy of mine from school was like, hey, we know what you're doing over there. Come hop over here. Did another studio doing environment work. And from there, that game finished. And then Sony came a calling right at the perfect time. And they're like, hey, how you doing? We're wondering, are you open? Are you available to come have a meeting? We want to talk to you about coming back for a project. I'm like, heck yeah. And I went in and they were asking about God of War Ascension. And they're like, all right, so the reason we want you back is because you did a lot of cool destruction stuff. We love what you did. And this game is going to focus heavily on destruction. Things are going to reform, from being destroyed. We're going to see it break, fall down, and then see it combine. Things are going to be floating, and it's going to look very magical and stuff. I'm like, sure, yeah, I'm down for this. I can do it. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, how the hell am I going to do that? I have no idea. I barely figured it out last time, and I just did it. So I'm like, you're not going to say no to Sony. So I did it. I came in, and they're like, all right, so we kind of need you to kind of create the pipeline for how destruction is fully made. In the past games, it was just like whoever had the scene kind of did the destruction, and there wasn't a true pipeline for it. So I'm like, all right, cool, sure, and kind of did it. It was like, and took all the knowledge from what I can from this guy who did similar destruction, how this guy did sims, how this guy dealt with the animations, how this guy implemented them, and was like, all right, here's how it goes through, and it funnels all through me and my department, and we break it and make it look awesome. And from there, God of War Ascension, for us, I had a great time on it because it was me being I guess technically I was kind of a lead, but I didn't know I was a lead, and I wasn't told I was a lead. But I didn't have a lot of the power that I had, later on of like hiring. So like, they're just like, here's your new guy. You're going to work with him. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know we were looking. Sure. And, work with them. And some people ended up cool. And that's where I ended up meeting Danny. I kind of was working with Danny because he came on as a cinematic artist as well too. And he's like, he had some destruction stuff. So I kind of taught Danny a little bit of how we do things. And what's funny was a little side note. We're going to have so many side notes in this.
I love side notes.
Yeah, I'm the side note guy. I love telling stories, as you'll find out. Danny was applying at Sony, and I had other people hit me up and be like, hey man, I'm trying to apply. Can you help me out? I'm like, all right, let me try to give you an idea on what they're looking for. And every time I tried to help somebody with, give them info, they never got the job. And with Danny, I was just so broken. I'm like, look, man, I'm sorry. I hadn't really known him. I knew him through my friend / teacher, Mike Williams, who was Danny's teacher at another AI. He's like, hey, I'm going to send this guy to you. He's trying to apply at Sony. Help him out. I'm like, all right. And I just told Danny, like, I'm sorry, dude. I can't help you. honestly, every time I've helped somebody, they didn't get the job. So I'm not going to help you. And he got the job because I didn't help him. So I'm like, haha. And he came on and he was doing destruction for some things, and he would ask me how to do stuff. So we were, talking, and that's when we got to become friends and hang out. And I love Danny. Danny's awesome. Me, him, and Raul just always talk shop all the time, So from there, they converted me to full-time at the end of Ascension. I'm like, all right, this is awesome. I'm hired full-time at Sony. I'm working on this new unannounced game. A couple months into that, and that, sadly got canceled. And along with a bunch of other people, that was a really bad day. Coming into the studio, you just felt the tension. You're like, why are these fancy Mercedes cars in the parking lot? And you walk in, and just like, all right, something's going on. And like, come to the back room. You see the directors there, just eyes just red, just like, what's going on? And they're like, effective immediately. And so it's like, oh man, but thankfully they did their best to take care of us. They had us they set up meetings with other companies around so that we can hop into another studio really quick. So I'm like, man, it's sad that had to happen, but Sony helped out so much. Like, and that's one where I was like, all right, they really care. Like, they didn't want to do this, but it just had to happen. After that, I tried to apply at Naughty Dog, and the lady was like, oh my God, we need people like you. And, it's Naughty Dog. They do awesome games, and the destruction, I love the destruction for their games. I'm like, I'd reference it. I would look at it and just slow motion it and just see like, all right, how's it going? How are they doing this? All right, okay, that's what they're doing. And then she's like, yeah, we need people like you, but not right now, in like 6 months. I'm like, I can't do that. I gotta get a job now. But thankfully, Treyarch had popped in. They were looking for a destruction artist. I'm like, all right, cool. That's perfect. That's what I do. I want to keep doing destruction. That's what I want to do. And ended up applying with them, and through a craziness of a story with them. I don't know if we can get into that one right now, or we can save that story for later. But
we'll save it for later.
Got the job. Okay, I got the job there, and I came in and saw how they do destruction, and they had already had the pipeline. And I was like, all right, cool. This is the first time that I got to a studio that has the pipeline set. What are they doing? And thankfully on Ascension, when I came to Ascension, they were like, all right, set it up, find a program that does destruction, and we'll look into it and we'll buy it. And I was looking up a couple things at the time. At the time, Houdini was still insanely crazy, not really what it is now of like, all right, more people are using it, tutorials. There was Fracture. I looked into Fracture. I looked into Pull Down, and Pull Down, it seemed the easiest for me, for what I can tell. I'm like, all right, let's get this. We got that one. Turns out Treyarch uses Pull Down it as well. So I'm like, yes, easy score. That's great. I don't have to learn some new crazier thing. This is what they got. Awesome. And, did a lot of destruction for there, and it was pretty cool. It was a good time. It's got a little hectic, towards the end, crunch stuff, as you would expect. But then right as Black Ops 3 ended, Sony came a-calling again at the right time again. I'm like, man, are they just following me? They're like, hey, we're ramping up for the next game, and we want to talk to you about bringing it back on and doing your thing. So, and what's funny is like at random times throughout the process on Black Ops 3, a couple Sony people would hit me up and be like, Ruben, we need you. When are you coming? I'm like, tell them when they need me to reach out. And eventually they did. And they're like, see, we told you we'd bring you back. I'm like, I knew, but that's awesome. Thank you guys. I love it. So I came in and we just started, blowing stuff up for the newest God of War that came out a couple years ago. And it was so awesome because I got to come in and they're like, you're going to be the boss. You're going to get to choose your people. You get the power. So I'm like, yeah. And I came in and I was able to interview people that I thought were good and say yes, say no to some people. And it was a great time. I had a hell of a time. I was able to hire one of my students as well too to come to destruction because she hounded me constantly in school of like, all right, show me how to do destruction. I'm like, that's not the curriculum. Talk to me after class. All right, I got to go. She's like, all right, talk to me eventually about it. I'm like, all right, fine. And finally kind of taught her how it is. And I'd also hired another student on Ascension as well too to just do destruction. And, he had a good time as well. And then sadly, we got cut, so he got let go. But Um, it's just cool to see how that works. And then since God of War, the 2018 version, I've just been there. I've just been here blowing stuff up for this new game, and it's been a crazy ride. I love it. I love it.
Where do you, like, in your mind, where does this role sit? I guess from what it sounds like you described to me, you sit closest with cinematics, I guess, because that's where all the big set pieces tend to be. And a big, you're not like, oh, make this little wooden chair break when Kratos hits it with an axe. It's no, like, Destructionize the cinematics, the big set pieces, like in Uncharted with the train scene, a Destructionize is probably playing a very big part in that. So is that where you see, like, if you were to put the role in, because, in a moment, like, if you take, like, I don't know, prop art and environment art, like, very similar disciplines, and they probably sit kind of in the same bracket. Do you think the Destructionize sits in the same bracket as cinematics?
It's actually, I would even say, a little bit of environment, because we actually do handle even just the little stool that Kratos breaks as well. So we handle the little stuff and as well as the big stuff now. So that's what's really cool, is where I guess that more so came into play on this recent God of War 2018, whereas we actually got to do physics stuff. The past games, there was not really like physics objects that broke and you interacted with them. They were always baked animation. So like the jars, in the past games, you break them. That was a baked animation that, boom, it breaks. It's always the same thing playing. You'd always see some floating pieces or interpenetration against other walls because it's a bake. And you'd have to tell people, be like, try not to place it too up against a wall because we're going to see all those pieces clip through it. And for the most part, they would listen. But now that we have physics objects, it's like, all right, you can place it wherever you want. Still kind of for the most part, sometimes we're even able to do this hybrid of anim to physics, to where you animate the first couple frames so that it looks and moves nicely, and then physics takes over and the inertia of it just goes around. So you can still place a vase next to a wall, and if for some specific reason you need it to break a specific way, the first couple frames are animated and then the inertia just takes over, and we can choose whether it's half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. That it changes.
Points for like where it's coming from, because I imagine if you're going like animated frames, there's no point of origin for momentum. So I'm guessing if you got like a vase breaking, the top pieces, you have to like point in a direction for them to say, okay, let physics take over, but make sure they start moving in that direction first. Like, how does
thankfully it's normally what the process is: we get the art, we break it, we cut the geo up, fill all the inside faces, make it look like it's nice, rotate it around, and we can either just animate, bake that, or convert it to a physics node that has that geo in there and the collision on top. And the physics node is what we can then animate. And if the animation goes from 0 to 10 and just stops right there, we can set the animated physics to just, the inertia will just continue movement naturally. So thankfully it's pretty simple in that term of just, as long as you're animating the physics node and it moves, and within the time frame that you set it to swap, it'll just move naturally. And that helps a lot, because if the player's next to a wall, or the object's next to a wall, or the player's next to it, you'll see it move and then bounce off of them and then continue on. It saves that hassle of like, oh, don't put it up against a wall because it's going to clip, or if the player's next to it, this piece is going to cut right through the camera potentially. This allows us to have that freedom to kind of choose what we want to do. So we go with either the small little things or the big crazy stuff. For us, we tend to want to have a swap of like, all right, we're going to work on this crazy epic scene. Give me a crate to break.
Yeah.
Crazy epic scene. Give me a little stool to break. Give me a vase to break. Just to kind of just have mundane, simple tasks. Be like, I can just shut my brain off and just break this. And I don't have to worry, instead of like, all right, this has to break this way. It's going to fall that way. Oh, this is gameplay. It has to go that way. No pieces can go inside the floor. It has to be a certain height. Otherwise, the player is going to get stuck. Those are always the fun, cool ones, the crazy ones. But sometimes it's just the simplest ones of just like, go break that crate and just load it up and just smash, and people are having a good time with it.
Well, I guess if you're breaking a crate as well, it's very much, I guess it's quite a solo experience. It's like, there's not really much collaboration required aside from, hey, where's the prop I need? That one. Okay, that's one breaking. Cool.
Yep.
Whereas with your big stuff, it's like, okay, cinematics, what are we doing? What's the camera angles? And like the director people probably have a lot to say about okay, tech artists. Oh, hold on, like optimization time. Like let's bear that in mind.
Yeah,
so
you
I guess
can't
that's a
break
far
that
more
many
intense.
pieces, Ruben.
Well, I mean, you know, it's. I've seen there's a I feel terrible for saying this. It's Simon, and then he's the Houdini Simon guy. I know him as, and I'm so sorry. His second name is escaping me, but he's been posting some really interesting Houdini destructible stuff on where it's like he's got some concrete barricades and he's like shooting them when they smash up, and I'm like, that's more detail than I remember seeing. And I'm like, I'm going back and watching Battlefield videos. I'm like, oh yeah, they're just one big piece with some VFX around it. These are tiny little bits of rubble and pebbles, and that's real time. And I'm like, okay, Houdini's starting to like really scare me.
It's starting to come into play of like, oh shit, this is gonna start to change things. But for right now, it's still a nice like, all right, I can still kind of keep what I'm doing before while mixing in a bit of the Houdini stuff, mainly like the shattering for me with Houdini, the creating the shattered geo. So much better than just a simple, just like as I call Fruit Ninja slices with like Voronoi patterns from other programs, you know. And most of the time I would still hand cut a lot of stuff myself. Just go in and just like, all right, cut tool. All right. And cut that extract, fill in the pieces, fill in the other side. All right, cut this side. All right. And cut it that way if I really wanted it to look interesting. For like smaller props, you know, like a vase, usually we just let the Voronoi pattern handle it. And it's a vase, you're not really going to care that there's little intricate cuts. But now we can use Houdini's, you know, cutting, and it gets us the same idea faster, and we get to see the little cuts. I'm like, all right, cool. Now it's starting to come together. You know, it's slowly but surely. But obviously with Houdini, it's like, all right, this is definitely like more movie and TV stuff for kind of what we're doing. It's still a bit much. And I know having been on these past God of War games, I know eventually the beast of optimization is looming. And it's like, you got a lot of pieces in this sim. I'm going to take them away. It's like, man, there goes this and that. So even though we have Houdini now, I'm still telling myself and my guys, like, let's not go too crazy. If you're going to go crazy, put it in a layer that we can instantly turn off and not have go into the game. And because I just know eventually optimization is going to hit us. So
it's
a balance.
For people though, like, so like we're at the moment, we're at this stage where I feel like the destruction side of stuff is peaking. It's kind of entered that space where Substance Designer was probably like 5 years ago, where it's like, oh, I can do this cool stuff and it's quite accessible and there's a lot of learning content. Okay, and we'll start, like, you know, Helio was at the forefront of that. It's like, you know, let's make cool stuff like with just materials. And it's like, hey, look, this is all done procedurally and I can make infinite variations of it. And it's like, oh, okay, you kind of capture the imagination of a bunch of people. I feel like this field is, and I am accrediting this mostly to Houdini. It's kind of in that stage. I mean, even me, I've dabbled and had a little look at it out of my realms of expertise, and might be a bit too technical for me, but it's like people are starting to get imaginative with it. They're starting to, oh, this could do this, and there's a lot of learning content. And Simon, the guy I mentioned, he's, you know, fantastic. He's the forefront of learning content for Houdini, and I'm like, okay, like this is starting to capture people's imagination. For those students out there who, and you know, a lot of my mentees, I'm having to kind of rein in on the material side of things because they see all these crazy cool materials and they're like, oh, so this is material art. And I'm like, no. That's not really material art. That's just them flexing on how good they are in the software. This is material art. And I'm like teaching them that. And I feel like Houdini might be in that sort of space right now. There's a lot of people entering it and they're like, oh, look at this crazy stuff I'm going to do. No, it's more like this. So for those entering that space, like, what kind of stuff, what advice would you have? What software would you say to look at? What techniques should they be thinking about? Because I do think they're gonna go down the exact same rabbit hole as the material art field did. That's super sexy and cool.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with games.
No, yeah. It's like the new fad, and you don't want to, as I say, you got to crawl before you can walk. I mean, I guess that's the normal thing to say too. But when it comes to these programs, like whenever the newest, you know, button click to save you 5 button clicks came out, I would still teach my students the old method and as well as the new one, because I told them, like, you're going to go to a studio that's not going to have this new version. You're going to go to a studio that has a couple versions back. So I'm going to show you how it's done this way. And then when you get to a studio that has this cool the new tool, then you can use that. It's always good to just kind of know the basics. No matter what, I tell them, learn the basics first. And for me, whenever I was doing this, the main thing was I graduated with a bachelor's in animation, and I also did a lot of modeling works too. So just like I tell my bosses, I need modelers that know how to make something look broken and make it look cool. I also need animators that know and understand weight and physics and how things move and how a shot should look visually interesting. Because yeah, you can take, we've all done the bowling pin sim, in whatever program, being like, all right, make the ball hit the pins. It was cool. It was awesome. But then when you're like, all right, now we got to get it in game, make it optimized, make it look good. Okay, now you see the sim. The sims are just kind of like jittering on the floor, and you let your bake happen for all these times. It's like, yeah, you don't want that to happen. Kill those dead frames. That optimizes the amount of animation data that we're now using. All right, are you really going to see when this object swaps from pristine to broken? Are we really going to notice the bottom pieces? We can probably get rid of those bottom pieces, and boom, it's still going to look really cool. For me, it was always just like, know how to animate, know how to do the basics of modeling, because sometimes you can tell when people don't know one or the other, or even both, sadly. And it's like, yeah, that's not how it should go. It should look more like this, or like if you you shatter something. And I'm always looking around and being like, all right, how does it all look from 360? Because now you have to see it from all different vantage points. I'm like, all right, what does it look like? That one has a weird little pimple on the edge. Like that should have broken off. I'll just cut that off after the fact and delete it. Or just like, all right, I don't like this one. Change the seed of the destruction to make it look different. And like, all right, I like the way these shapes are looking. That looks visually appealing, not just like I hit shatter and that's it. It's like, no, it's not just the first draft is made into a movie. It's you finalize that script constantly, just like this. You're adjusting it and tweaking it. Once you gotten the shapes looking good, now it's time for the animation. Or if you're lucky, then it's just physics. And cool, physics work, but then even the physics, you have to adjust the collision on them, because sometimes you're seeing this thing clip and it cuts through because the collision that it came with isn't thick enough. All right, let me even thicken it out even more so it doesn't fall through the world. Or when it comes to the sim, like, all right, like I said, like don't just hit sim and done. Like, all right, plan out, like this is going to trigger this one, then that one's going to trigger, that'll allow it to fall this way. And then once it falls, then it's going to crack again, and it's going to roll this way to get out of the play space because the player needs to fight here. Don't just hit sim and done. Clean up those keyframes. If there's a camera involved, like I mentioned earlier, making sure that you don't cover the player, you don't, or the main character or the other enemy character or the camera doesn't get hit with just stuff flying at camera on purpose, like on accident. If it's on purpose, cool. But if it's on accident, get rid of that stuff. That's something I see in a lot of games recently, where it's like, all right, cool, I love seeing all this destruction for games. There's so many more games doing destruction, and I analyze the hell out of them, just like I analyze ours. And I tell my guys and everybody, like, we now live in a world of YouTube where you can hit slow motion on the settings and just watch, and you can go backwards. You can save the clip and rewind it and see how it looks and analyze it. I do that all the time with destruction, and there's a lot of like weird floaty little bits or pieces that just fly through the camera, and it's not really meant for a story element for it. It's just that was the sim, or people didn't clean up those little jittery bastards on the floor after it hits, and it's like, oh God, come on, just do that. Like that gets me. It's just like, just learn the basics. Just simple, what looks visually appealing in a model, visually appealing in an animation, and then learn, okay, is this in a gameplay? Is this in a cinematic where I can do whatever the hell I want? Cool, perfect. I don't have to worry. If it's a cinematic that leads into gameplay, shit, now I got to make sure, all right, if the camera looks this way, we can turn this off, and then we look back and the player's not even going to notice. We did so much of that on the last game that like I can analyze scene by scene of like what's swapping out just as the camera just moves. And we're like, can you move it just a little bit more so the camera doesn't see that object so we can magic trick it to a different thing? They're like, yeah, sure, cool. That's what was nice, is that everybody's so cool about helping each other out.
Yeah.
They'll come to us and be like, hey, can we load this thing up and have it tip this way to not let the player go that way? Sure. Cool. Thank you. It's collaboration.
So while we're on the topic of like kind of advice, off air we'll talk. You were telling me a very interesting story, which I think actually is going to probably help a lot of people about interviews and some hard lessons you've learned about interviews. I think it'll be very useful for people to hear about that.
Yeah. So back when
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's cool. This is a story that I love telling because it's just so like, what the hell? And I always told my students this, like, I'm happy to tell it because it's learning from my experience. Like, that's what this podcast is for too, to tell everybody's experience. And this, I think, will help too. Which I'm sure this is probably, everybody knows this at this point, but if a studio tells you or asks you, hey, have you played our games? You're going to say, yeah. You better say yeah. Because I learned the hard way. I was like a year and a half into school in college. I was too early. I didn't know what I was doing. A teacher, I was working on a project. He's like, oh, I know somebody at Treyarch. Let me get you an interview. They liked my work. They liked me. I was there. I was in there for an in-person interview and walking me around. And it was for the James Bond game at the time. And, Treyarch did a bunch of Call of Duty games as well too. And they're showing me around the stuff, around the studio. And he's like, all right, yeah, that's nice. Have you ever played our games before? I'm like, oh, no. But my roommate has, and he doesn't let us play because it's his game, but I get to watch him play, but it's really awesome. I love what you guys do. And I can just see his face just go, okay. Well, it's been a good day. Let's take you. We'll walk you out to the front door. Have a good bye. Man, I messed that up. And I'm like, all right, well, I probably should lie next time. And the next week in school, our teacher, Nick Marks, he in Game Wizards, he told everybody, he's like, all right, listen up, everybody. If you're at a studio in an interview and they ask you, have you ever played their game? And you say, yeah. If you haven't, you lie and you say you have. You go look at YouTube playthroughs and you say, yeah, I love this moment when I couldn't figure this out. You lie because you never want to say no. Got it? Good. I never told him what happened. He just knew because, he knew students there that eventually the story got to him. But I knew he was talking to me directly of like, screwed up, but don't let that happen again. So cut to 7 years later, after I'm let go from the canceled game at Sony, I have the interview at Treyarch, and I read the email wrong, and I wake up to a phone call from the HR lady. She's like, "Hi, Ruben, how are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good. I'm excited for today." "Oh, okay, that's interesting. Your interview's happening now." Okay, and I'm quickly checking my phone. I'm like, well, when is 10 o'clock? I thought it was at 12. She's like, it's at 10. For some reason, I thought it said 12. I don't know why. We kind of had a similar thing with that today of thinking I read the wrong time for this.
Me just getting, time zones screw me up, man. It's so hard to keep track of all this shit.
Yeah, especially now. Everything just bleeds together.
Yes.
So I'm just like, oh my God. I'm just laying there like, again, 7 years later, I screwed up again. And you can just hear her. She's like, okay, well, we'll call you back. I'm like, okay, bye. She hangs up, and I'm just sitting there and sulking, and all of a sudden my phone starts going off with messages and calls, and it's from my friends from school, and they're like, dude, again? Come on, Ruben. How do you screw up twice at the same studio? I'm like, I haven't told anybody. I'm still sulking. What happened was, this is such a small industry. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Just like my teacher found out without me even telling him, he knew people. Everybody knows everybody. The HR lady went to some people that went to school with me that were working there. And, they knew me. They always said I was good. They're like, so Ruben missed his interview. Is that like him? Would we expect him to not be on time and do this kind of thing? They're like, that's not like Ruben at all. Ruben's always been on point. He does his work. He's a cool dude. He must be dead. Let me text some of his friends. And then that's how it got to my friends that I screwed up.
God.
And the HR lady calls me back, like 30 minutes later. And it's like, okay, you're very lucky because you have a lot of good friends, and they vouched for you and said this is a one-off. Your interview's tomorrow. We suggest you're here early. It's at 10. I was there at 9 o'clock, just waiting in the office, just like, hi, I'm here now. And eventually they came around. They're like, hey, you're only a day late. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. And
yeah, I can imagine you got ripped for that quite a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. And thankfully, they liked me. I did the test for them, did the test, and I got the job. And I got to work there, and it was nice. It was cool. Up until, like I said, when things just got a little crazy. But it showed me like it's such a small industry. Everybody knows everybody.
That's the thing which I find, like you always hear it when you're like go through your education and you're like younger. You always hear it's a small industry. Careful who you burn bridges with. And I'm always like, is it? And it's only through doing this podcast. I'm like, Jesus Christ! Everyone knows fucking everyone, because I'll speak to Danny and he'd be like, oh, you need to speak to this guy. And I'm like, I know that guy. How do you know him? Oh, I worked with him like X amount of years ago. Oh, cool. Okay, I'll talk to that guy. And then that guy knows 4 other people I know from like, history or from past studios. And I'm like, holy shit, it is the smallest fucking industry I've ever seen. Like,
yeah.
And it worries. It's kind of funny because I see with Discord and like micro communities, Discord, Twitter, or whatever, and people like to say their opinions and say what they got to say. And I'm like, man, and Raul mentioned this when he was on. He's like, people remember that. You are a dev and you're going to shit talk a studio for some bad shit that happens to them. You want to be, people remember that. It sticks. And I'm like, I did used to say, does it? People don't really pay attention. I'm like, no, everyone knows everyone. It really is the case. Even between, the bit which was really curious is between US and EU. People still know each other. Like, because I used to say they're like 2 separate bubbles almost, and they kind of are. But there's a lot of overlap. People move back and forth quite a lot. And I was like, shit, like, it is just a tiny, tiny industry. And I guess I don't know how to word this. Not watch what you say. If it's like, on social media platform, whatever you put on your outstation or your portfolio is like your social media links.
Yeah.
Be very aware of what you're putting on there.
Dude, there was, like I love my horror stuff. Like I post a lot of horror and geeky things, but I don't get political and stuff. Just because I don't need to get in that fight, and I'm pretty neutral when it comes to a lot of things. And sure, I hate other stuff. I'm just like, I'm just gonna stay in my lane. I already see enough of it. I'm just gonna post what I like and not bring any negativity out there, and not say the wrong thing that's potentially gonna piss somebody else off, and that's gonna get me, looked at by higher ups at here or there, And it's very, very careful. You got to be now, and that's what I would always tell my students. I'm like, look, telling them that story and letting them know, like, the people you're sitting next to, those are going to be your peers. They're going to be your coworker. They're going to be your boss. They're going to be your producer. They're going to be the guy under you that you're training, the person in the other room, the teacher in the other room. There was a guy in school. He was at an animation studio, and a teacher's resume came along. And they're like, hey, you went to AI. Do you know this teacher? And he looked, he's like, oh, her. Crumbled it up. He's like, 10 points. And he threw it right in the trash. He's like, don't hire that bitch. She was horrible. And I'm like, whoa, student costs the teacher a job. And
that I hear quite a lot. I hear that a lot because especially in the UK. So the thing is, you guys seem to have a bit. I mean, look, okay, I'm not going to get into like student costs now because it says rabbit hole, but like US, you guys have very big costs for teaching, but at least you have a lot of industry people like yourself who quit to teach. In the UK and EU, not so common. And I've seen it where, like, you've had somebody who's been a teacher, and they have some good students who work very hard and get themselves into the industry. And I've seen it where, like, they apply somewhere, the students like, hey, I taught you any jobs. Wait, you were really rude to me and not a very good teacher, and you weren't very no. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand about this whole recommendation game you play when you do this. I will only recommend people who I actually think are good. If we could be the best friends, if you're a shithead, I'm not recommending you. I'm not because I'm gonna put my reputation on the line. It's not just you, it's me. Yeah. And I think a lot of people understand
ruins that. Future references that you would
Yeah.
place as well. If that one is not good, I have a buddy that he's cool, and at the time I was like, dude, I will not recommend you to this studio because you are not ready. And eventually he kicked his ass in gear, and he's good. And I'm like, dude, I wish I could get you right now. And he's like, I know, but I'm at this studio. I'm pretty locked in. I'm like, and that's good. I'm happy for you. But just letting you know, now I would have got you because now you're top quality. He's like, that's good to hear. It's don't burn bridges. Be friends. Like, be friendly. Sure, maybe every now and then you'll come across that one or two person that is like, yeah, I'm never gonna have to worry about you. Like, but if you're bad with them, they got friends. Does that person know somebody that and they're like, oh yeah, they treated my friend kind of crappy. So yeah, it's a very touchy thing.
I think it's an art to it in a sense of, I mean, look, I grew up in a sporting background. My peers are family to me, so I treat everyone like my friend. Look, you do come across people who you just don't gel with, and you will clash sometimes. And I think there's an art. Younger me didn't get this, and I probably made some mistakes in the past. But it's learning to respectfully get along. I don't have to be. I don't have to make small talk with you. I don't have to be chummy with you. What do you need? I need this. Can you do it? Yeah, sure. Okay, we move on, and it's like learning to be okay with that. Like, and you'll feel it as well. Like, there's a mutual understanding between you and the other person. You get it when you're not getting on with somebody and you've clashed. All right, but we still need to do a job.
Yeah,
I think
acquaintances.
Yes, exactly. It's a very good term for it. It's kind of like, okay, we're not friends, fine, whatever. Like, you don't have to be chummy with absolutely everybody. But being okay with a very cold working relationship with somebody, it's something that's going to come in your career at some point. Everyone faces it, like, at some point. I think it's an art. It's a weird game we played. I guess you could call it, like, at that point you're calling it politics, I guess. But
politics, yeah,
it is
That's
weird
something they don't
game.
teach you in school. That's why I make sure to tell my students that. I'm like, look, just don't burn bridges. Like, again, I'm telling them that story, and I think a good amount of them learned it. And it's stuff that I never was told. I was just told, all right, here's how you model a box. Here's how you animate. Here's how you do this. And just like, all right, cool. I know that, but like, what's the other thing of like, all right, talk about crunch, talk about politics, talk about like, how is it to get the job over your friend? Like, oh, like when I dealt with that on Ascension after converting from Ascension, that's when I learned, like, oh yeah, me even saying you're competing with your friends, I finally lived it, because when we were there, I was friends, and I still am, with a great environment artist, Daryl, and it was me and her working there and a bunch of other people, and they called me into the office. They're like, look, we want to offer you the full-time position. We only had one spot, and it was between you and Daryl. So you got the job. And I was like, oh, cool. Oh man, wow, I kind of wish you guys didn't tell me that. That hurts. I'm like, man, I just took out my friend without even knowing it. I don't know if maybe that helps, but that's when I was like, oh wow, you really are competing with each other. And I was kind of like, it kind of made me feel sad about it. And she was like, dude, she punched me. She's like, I'm happy for you. Bring me back. And I did. I brought her back, when I could. So it's like, you just help each other. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, you really are competing with each other. It's not just like, yeah, you'll eventually come to a studio where that person is working. You're competing with that person. So I made sure to add that into my stories as well, when I would tell my students, like, look, you guys are coming into this place competing with everyone here, there, the other campus, Noman, Cal Arts, all over the world, people that have been in the industry, people that just got fired from that company. You're in a flooded market. What are you going to bring to the table besides good art? You bring being a good person. Use this time. You guys are getting in mountains of debt, like 10 years minimum, and I was lucky to just barely pay that off. And I've always had good jobs, and I made sure that I put money aside, and I was always good. And I know people that are pizza delivery guys, with my degree. Like, what the hell? That sucks. And I know people that were good artists that just had the wrong timing of going to the wrong studios that just couldn't keep them or couldn't pay them, or we couldn't hire them on a certain project. It just wouldn't line up. And eventually, like, governments got their loans, started taking their money out. They had to move back home, and it's a trip. Like, even seeing great artists, great people just not do it because, again, they got the bad end of the stick, the small stick or whatever. And it's just, you never know. So I tried to warn my students, like, don't make this time to just screw around and play, Smash Brothers downstairs. Because I saw it all the time. Every time I'd always see those group of kids, and I had one student in there, and I went down and I yelled at him, like, Tim, get your ass back up into class. You got finals. He's like, I'm sorry, Ruben. And he went up there, and it's like, dude, you guys can't do this because I'm seeing you do this, and I will not hire those people that are in that clique. Yeah. There was always that, and I could tell, like, all right, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. You're not gonna do anything. You're gonna have a hard time. Maybe you got potential, and seeing what happens. And it was the same crop of cliques that would always come around. And it's like, guys, you're paying for this. Your parents are paying. Somebody's going to pay the bill for this eventually. Don't waste this time. Make this count. Don't let it just be a piece of paper you graduate with. Make it be an actual job, because this is a cushy job. We get to sit in our back when we can sit in the studio, nice air conditioning, internet, computers, monitors galore, snacks, friends, and just do this. I don't have to, flip burgers and do manual labor. It was like, it's another story that somebody told me, or that happened to me when I was a kid. When we were in elementary back home, I'm from Selma, raising capital of the world, represent. We had a guy come into our elementary school, and he's like, look, I want you guys to draw what you want to be on a piece of paper. And everybody drew what they want to be: fireman, police officer, doctor. And I drew Hollywood. And I drew Power Rangers, Beetleborg, and a bunch of other entertainment things. I wasn't a big gamer, surprisingly. I was more so just a movie guy, and I just fell into the game art side when I was in school. But I wanted to do something in entertainment. And the guy was like, all right, you guys are all done? Whatever you drew, I want you to be that. When I come back to your town in 10, 15 years, I don't want to see you guys handing me my burger. I want to see your guys' name, whatever you're doing. And I like to think that I'm now doing what I drew.
Yeah.
More so in games, but I'm still in entertainment. And I wish I could, meet that guy and be like, hey, look, I did what you asked. I did what you wanted us to do. And it's like, that's cool. Small guy, a guy from a small town. And even my buddy Elliot, he's as well too. He followed the same path as me. He's at Sony with me as well too, doing destruction. Both of us from Selma, just doing this. And I'll go and talk to my high school and tell them, like, look, you can do it. You can get out of the town. You can go do big, cool things. And it's a trip. I like to give back to that, and tell them, like, there's a possibility, but I'm also still real. I was even real with the high school kids, telling them the same talk I told the college guys of, you guys got it lucky now. You're in high school. It's free for the most part. Some of you guys are struggling. I know, because this is, a very small town, small income town. It's going to be hard. Some of you, it's going to get harder. Some of you are going to get skate by. Some of you are going to get lucky. Just bust your ass and do what you can, because the world sucks, and it's going to beat you down. It's really hard. It's kind of like that Rocky, phrase, keep moving forward.
Dude, I think, you know what? I mean, we've been going for nearly an hour, and I think it's that. Normally I ask a question at the end, and this time I'm not going to. I don't think. I think that's going to be something I think that needs to sit with a lot of people. That whole, especially the pizza boy bit. There's pizza boys with this degree.
I know a lot.
I think that's going to hit home for a lot of people, both in and out of the industry. I want to leave that with people. I think that's quite an important message. Dude, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this has been a blast. I say it every week. It goes super fucking quick. It's I'm gonna get you back on. I'm actually gonna get your whole team on. Like, I've had you all on now at this point. I'm like, you know what? You should all come on at the same time and do this and this rift.
Oh man, that would be a hell of a crazy one. Especially depending on who you get. If it's me, Raul, and Danny and Elliot in a room, I don't know. That's gonna have to a limited access. We'll just go off.
thank you so much. And everyone listening, I say every week, remember, like, follow, share, subscribe. The more like you guys do that, it obviously helps the podcast, but also helps people see the great information that people like Ruben are sharing. So, man, we're going to wrap. Everyone listening, I'll catch you next week. Dude, thank you so much.
Thank you.